Hello and welcome to Nerds in the Morning, the new Tuesday morning show with me, your host, Richalvarez. I have a couple of very special guests today, and we're going to be talking about some of our favorite movies and some of the movies that made us a little disappointed. My first guest, Chris Muller of the Richalvarez Channel, the same channel as me, and then cinematographer Andrew Irish is here with us today.
Hello, everybody.
So guys, for this very first episode of Nerds in the Morning, I thought, we'd start out with something a little bit easier. Usually we're going to be talking about relevant topics either in the video game or movie industry, or, well, mostly those and maybe some other stuff. But here we're just going to be talking about some of our favorite movies. So, Chris, why don't you tell us, what was your favorite movie?
Favorite movie of all time. Okay, I'm gonna kind of cheat here and lump three movies together, which is the Lord of the Rings trilogy.
That's cheating just a little bit?
Cheating a little bit.
Just a little bit? I'll accept that, though.
Originally, Tolkien wanted to write them all as one entire book, but he had to
true.
condense them because his publisher said it's too long. Anyway, the reason why I'm choosing Lord of the Rings is because, number one, I love that genre. The sci-fi, medieval fantasy, or I guess it's not really sci-fi. Sorry, the epic medieval fantasy.
Sometimes it is sci-fi if you're talking about like Star Wars being a fantasy.
I almost slipped into Star Wars there. No. But medieval fantasy, that genre.
Medieval fantasy.
I mean, side note, Game of Thrones is currently my favorite TV show, but we're sticking to movies right now. I remember when I saw Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring in theaters, when that last shot ended with Sam and Frodo like going off into the boat, I remember thinking, this is going to be the longest year of my life, waiting for Two Towers to come out. I felt so depressed, and it came out during like the Christmas season, so I should have been happy. But when that shot ended, I remember thinking, I have to wait an entire year to know what's going to happen, and it was just so demoralizing knowing that, it was going to be such a long wait. But Anyway, the other two films came out. They were fantastic. I mean, a lot of people say, Return of the King had way too many endings. I loved them all, except for, my bladder and the movie theater having to hold it. But
I remember that. I had to take like a 15-minute pee when that movie was over.
It's just the Lord of the Rings, that universe. I mean, Peter Jackson did a great job directing him, but Tolkien, just holy smokes, like his world is so deep. He wrote like languages. There's so much backstory. You can get into the Silmarillion and all that, like, extra, information that he gave. But Lord of the Rings.
And if you watch the extended cuts, they're even longer.
They're even longer, yeah.
So, Andy, how about you? What's your favorite movie of all time?
I thought of a favorite movie, and I'm changing my favorite movie because I just remember this one. It's been a long time since I've seen it, but I would have to say, at least what I can think of right now would be Star Trek: First Contact.
Oh yeah, that's probably my favorite, at least of the Star Trek movies.
And it's, I remember watching Generations, and I was blown away because I grew up watching The Next Generation, and I've seen every episode like a billion times. And then First Contact came out after Generations, everything was over. I had no idea they were making a new one. It was on my birthday, and I went and saw it. And the new Enterprise, the new uniforms, like everything about it was perfection. And then the whole idea of assimilating data from being a machine into a human, or organic anyways, it was brilliant. That scene where she blows on his arm with the new skin and hair. And everything surprised me in that movie. I think, and Jonathan Frakes directing it, I believe, it was like perfect movie perfection. I think I've seen it like 50 million times.
If only Insurrection could have been as good.
Right. So That was a shame for sure.
Yeah, but that is definitely my favorite Star Trek movie. The new movies by Abrams, they're pretty good, but I've always been a next gen fan, so First Contact for sure.
And that one definitely it hit me at the right time. So anything beyond that, even though it could be good, could be bad, or whatever, that's the one I hold on to.
Yeah,
for sure.
So moving on to me, my favorite movie is Jurassic Park, and the reason why I've chosen this, and it took me years to try to figure out what my favorite movie was, and Jurassic Park was always in the back of my mind, but I was just thinking like, oh, I can't say Jurassic Park. It's like people are like, it's a blockbuster. It could be, but like whatever. Jurassic Park, I saw it when I was a kid, and that's the movie that made me, want to go out and make movies. The only reason why I'm doing any video at all is because of Jurassic Park. And Andy, I hear that you have an experience with Jurassic Park as well.
Yes, that I have a very similar story. I saw it in the theater when it came out in '94. And my dad took me. I think it might have been 12.
I think it was actually 93.
93? Okay, yeah.
All right, early 90s.
In the old age, my mind can't.
Let's not get caught up in the details here.
So early 90s, my dad takes me to see this movie called Jurassic Park. Well, what's Jurassic Park? I found out. And I remember after I watched it how blown away I was at it, because you'd never seen computer animation in a movie like that was so obvious. Because, doing some research, I've seen they've done, like in the 80s, even they've had computer animation.
Yeah, there was young Sherlock Holmes had stuff, and
but
then
it wasn't
Terminator
that,
2
yeah.
had like the T-1000 silver crap.
That is right. Yeah, I don't know how I forgot about that.
But
right,
no
it
monsters, or anything like that.
It was more of a fantasy kind of a 3D. It wasn't like this could be a real thing. I had no idea. You'd think it's usually stop motion and stuff, and this was so smooth and so real. The lighting, the texture, everything, the sound design. So that would probably be.
And I still think it holds up today. Like, with the crappy CGI in movies today, like, Jurassic Park still looks just as good, or even better in some cases, than what people are trying to do in Hollywood these days.
Right,
So I just think it's fantastic.
Story was amazing. I was so blown away. I read the book before I saw the movie, but I still was pleasantly surprised about the movie, even though it veered off a little bit. But I'm at home, and we're sitting on my front porch, just talking to my dad, just sort of, it's in the late afternoon now. I'm like, Dad, how did they do that? It was just so incredible. And, the kind of computers we had at the time was just like, the old
Apple
giant.
Book 2.
Yeah, well, no, it wasn't even that. It was like before the first Macintosh, just green screen, and you're just basically operating in DOS and BASIC. And that was it. And I'd have these books, and I'd put in, these codes and stuff like that go along with it. And it's like, wow, it's doing stuff. So my dad's just thinking, he knows everything. And he goes, how'd they do that? Windows. And I don't know what Windows is. I didn't have a PC, so I'm thinking, like, do you do a program in DOS to make little boxes on the screen? Wow, that's amazing! They made dinosaurs, and it was like that. Then I thought about just like filmmaking, and I read all the books. I started watching that movie Magic special, and it just like since then, it was just that was what I wanted to do.
Yeah, there was the James Earl Jones making of Jurassic Park on television. It's on the DVDs now too. But it's just like, this is the making of Jurassic Park, and it shows you how they did everything, and that just blew my little 7 or 8 year old mind, however old I was at the time. All right, so moving to our darkest hour of this whole thing, what is the movie that disappointed you the most? Chris, let's start with you.
All right, so I'm gonna have to say the 2 Matrix sequels, and the reason why is because I actually didn't see The Matrix when it first came out. I saw that, like, right around the time that you actually showed them to me. Right around the time the sequels came out, you were like, you haven't seen The Matrix? You gotta see The Matrix. It's the best thing ever. And then we can watch the sequel. So I watched The Matrix, and that was one of those movies where literally the entire film, I was on the edge of my seat. I was like, what's going to happen next? Like, all the twists in the movie and everything. And you could tell because the Wachowski brothers, they like spent all of high school and like part of whatever, like
they spent a long time making the first Matrix movie.
Perfecting that, and they borrowed a lot from all those philosophical mind experiments. I mean, like there's all these thought experiments like Brain in the Jar, and then Plato's like man in a cave with shadows and stuff. Like they like worked on perfecting that script, and then the sequels come out, and I remember thinking like, this feels like they sat down and were like, how can we cram in as many special effects as possible? And
to me, the whole thing feels like fan fiction. Especially the last movie.
It's just, I don't know, like, I remember, like I said, for the first film, I'm on the edge of my seat the entire time. The script was amazing. The plot was great. And then the second 2 were just like, Like, I just, it felt empty. So, I don't know, it was just, for me, it was a huge disappointment. I wish that they had taken more time and not, I don't know, rushed him out.
Well,
I don't know if they rushed him, but it felt rushed. It felt incomplete.
I agree.
So
there's a big hole in my heart.
There's a big hole there.
The true Matrix sequel should have been, but they're not.
Anyway.
Right here under this Richalvarez logo.
Anyway, that's it for me.
All right.
Matrix disappointment.
Andy, what about you?
This is a tough one because there's so many. But I would have to say the first disappointment, the one that I was just crushed, was, speaking of Michael Crichton, was, I was a huge fan, of course, with Jurassic Park and all that. And this is the first movie that I saw that I read the book first that I was disappointed in, was, because usually it was okay, but was Sphere.
Oh, right, Sphere.
And the book I read multiple times because I thought the whole idea of it, the characters, like I was there when I was reading that book, and I read it, many, many times. You'd have to do that forced study hall in school. Oh, just read Sphere again. Oh, awesome. And I really loved that book. And in fact, that was the first book I actually completed on my own completely without anybody saying, read this book. So I just read it. I said, hey, what's this? Sphere. And that's what got me into Michael Crichton and Jurassic Park followed and all that. And I see the movie, and I don't know if it's the movie really did suck, from what a lot of people told me it did, or if it was just the translation from page to screen failed completely.
I actually liked the movie. I don't like it near as much as I like the book of Sphere.
Yeah.
Because I'm a huge Crichton fan as well. Ever since I saw the movie of Jurassic Park and then went back and read the book and then read all the Crichton books. I think Samuel Jackson is hilarious in that movie.
Yeah.
I hate squid. But I know exactly what you mean. There's so much context because Michael Crichton has so much science in every page.
Yeah.
And then when they turn it into a film, it just gets kind of lost in translation, and it just becomes this movie about the thing about the movie Sphere is it's not a happy adventure movie. It's kind of a depressed adventure movie. The only reason why I like it is because I like the performances by some of the actors. There's Sharon Stone, there's Samuel Jackson, and then there's what's his name?
Dustin Hoffman.
Yeah. Anyways, but I think that it has the same kind of problems. And I can say this now. Even though Jurassic Park is my favorite movie, it's a terrible adaptation of the book if you think about it, because there's so much more in the book and there's so much that's going on there. If they were to but I could only see Spielberg as the one to remake it. If they were going to do it again and make it a 3.5-hour movie and try to include everything, the teenage T-Rex that's chasing them in the river and all that cool stuff, then it would be even better. But it's still my favorite movie. I still think it's great. But the book of Jurassic Park is even better than the film. And I think that it had some of those. The difference, though, is that when they did Sphere, it just didn't have that magic. Even though Spielberg cut a ton of stuff out of the movie, he still had that Spielberg magic that made it its own thing and made it this awesome movie. So
yeah, I think for me too, part of it was the casting, the fact that they got A-list at the time, A-list actors, and I felt like that's what was sort of driving this whole movie. And I think they got lazy because they thought that the performances of those actors would carry the film.
Right, I guess that was the kind of the difference in Jurassic Park, because they got kind of like lesser known actors.
Right.
Except for maybe Jeff Goldblum, who was in The Fly.
Well, that's the thing, because they were all great actors, I think, in Sphere. They're on their own in their own right, but together as that ensemble cast, I felt like there was no real. Like, I saw those actors. I didn't see the characters. I saw Dustin Hoffman in the movie, and it's like it didn't. Part of it was I was so attached to the book that that always happens. That's why I never ever read a book first before I watch the movie. I always watch the movie and then I read the book. That way, the book's always better. But at least now I still like the movie.
Right.
So Sphere.
Moving on to happier things. So, what are you guys looking most forward to as far as movies are concerned? We're still on movies. Chris, is there a movie you're looking forward to?
Oh yeah, and obviously, since I'm such a huge Lord of the Rings fan, the coming up Hobbit films, the next two.
The next two Hobbit films.
Two Hobbit films.
So that's pathetically predictable, Chris.
Pathetically predictable.
I'm just kidding.
Thanks, Jarek. But I mean, simple. I still love that universe. I mean, the books themselves, obviously. I mean, Tolkien wrote The Hobbit first, and then he wrote Lord of the Rings, so his writing improved, and I mean, The Hobbit is just Dungeons and Dragons, whereas like Lord of the Rings is just epic about the battle between good and evil. Still a great film.
Well, I think that The Hobbit was just supposed to be kind of like a fun, almost children's adventure of just, kind of fish out of water. Bilbo gets out of his shell and goes on an adventure. It wasn't supposed to be, dark or, mystical. It's just like, we're going to go, slay a dragon. Whereas then, afterwards he was like, I'm going to expand this universe and make Lord of the Rings. So since we got Lord of the Rings before The Hobbit, I could see where The Hobbit feels a little underwhelming. But I very much enjoyed the first Hobbit movie.
It was great. I'm looking forward to the next two. I mean, plot aside, it not being quite as epic as, Lord of the Rings, it's still going to be a great, trilogy.
Right. Andy?
What was the question again?
The question was, what movie are you most looking forward to?
Yeah, this one here is a dead giveaway. I'm a huge Superman fan, so obviously it's going to be the upcoming Superman versus Batman movie.
Don't you mean Batman versus Superman?
That also.
They don't know what they're going to call it.
I don't know. I don't care if it's got Superman in it. I'll see it. I really liked Man of Steel, and if Zack Snyder. I know a lot of people had some issues with his stuff before, and he's made some stinkers. I know in between, but just what he did with it, and what the whole team did with that at Warner Brothers, I thought that it was good. It had a lot of controversial stuff to it, but I like this world that they're in. Even though it's not my Superman, it's one that I could still get on board with. And so going on to the next movie, the fact that they're introducing Batman is really cool. And I was always really, really nervous about that. In fact, when I heard that Ben Affleck was going to be the new Batman, he wasn't my first choice. I had some other choices, a lot of similar choices from some of the other critics. But when I heard that, I just sort of like dropped my phone when I got the text. I'm like, oh no. And then I started going, well, why not?
I mean, he's directed some great movies over the last few years. He has proven that he can be a great director. But people, and in Argo and in The Town, he actually gave some great performances as well.
Yeah.
I guess what people are thinking is, can he actually play a convincing Batman? Because he did Daredevil a few years ago, and people didn't really like him as Daredevil.
I love that movie, except for I didn't like Colin Farrell
as Bullseye.
Yeah. It was just over the top. There was a couple issues I had, but none of them was really Ben Affleck. Mm-hmm. I thought he did a pretty good job, except for the teeter-totter scene where that just looked fake.
But I don't hate the movie either, but I think that it could have been better, obviously.
Well, yeah, but at the time when all the comic book movies that were coming out were that sort of campy, sort of the George Clooney Batman style, where for some reason that's the direction everybody was going with. Mm-hmm. Coming out of that, I thought it was much more serious. And then, Spider-Man came out, Sam Raimi's, which was kind of in that same sort of whimsical feel, but a little bit more tied down to reality. And then so, I don't think I have a problem with Ben Affleck as an actor in that genre, especially now that he's got a lot of stuff under his belt and he's proving himself to be a pretty heavy contender, I think, as not just an actor, but an amazing filmmaker.
I'm actually not worried about Ben Affleck at all. I think that he's dedicated enough. He'll get the job done, and he won't have a fake throat cancer growl.
I hope not. And I think this movie is going to be pretty awesome, and they know what expectations they have to live up to. I mean,
the only thing that I'm worried about is that DC and Warner Brothers might be kind of rushing now to compete with the Avengers, and so if it hadn't been for the Avengers, would we have seen a Man of Steel 2 before Batman versus Superman? Would we even seen a Batman versus Superman at all? Because I think the thing that's concerning most people is, some people who are concerned about it is, if we do Batman versus Superman before we do a second Man of Steel, does that mean that we're not going to get a whole lot of new chemistry between Lois and Clark? Are we going to see a whole lot of Clark just working at the Daily Planet? Because a lot of people, the main complaint from Man of Steel was that it was kind of doom and gloom and not a lot of hope. And that they were like, all right, well, here's the doom and gloom. And in the Man of Steel sequel, we're going to see hope, and he's going to be this hero, and he's going to be at the Daily Planet, and he's going to change into Superman, and it's going to be this great, true to Superman sequel. But now it's like, Avengers, and they were originally going to do a Justice League movie the same year as Avengers 2, but they slowed it down a little bit, so now we're getting a Batman Superman at the same time as Avengers 2. So that way, and I do think that is important. Yeah. I do want to state that I do think it's important that you have a Batman and Superman film before you do Justice League. Otherwise, that's what the Justice League movie is going to be all about, is Batman and Superman meeting up and becoming friends. They said that there's going to be some kind of they had the quote at Comic-Con from Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns. So we can only assume that there's going to be some influences in there. Now, whether Ben Affleck plays a Batman who was Batman before and is coming back,
they did confirm that he's going to be a more seasoned, he's seen some stuff.
Okay, so he's been Batman, and maybe he's coming back just like in the story, but maybe not as old as in
It's not
Dark
an
Knight
origin story from the stuff that I've been reading.
Right. And we don't need another Batman origin story.
Yeah, to kind of back it up a little bit too. One thing that I started thinking about after I saw Man of Steel, because I had to reflect on it. And everybody was complaining it was too violent, there was too much action, there wasn't enough love story.
It was too awesome.
Go back to Brendan Routh's Superman, or Superman
Returns, yeah.
It was all about the character, Clark Kent, trying to be Superman, but trying to get Lois back.
And people hated it.
They hated it. So they keep giving you that. You don't want it. But then they give you all the action that you can stand and handle. They don't want that. So it's like...
People are just never satisfied.
And when it comes to the timing and the pacing of what Warner Brothers is doing, I'm sure they have it all figured out. But I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe they're going to fail. It could be. I hope not, because they've been struggling for years compared to what Marvel's been doing. But I think that people have had enough solo movies where it's just one superhero. And I think like the way I would like to see it now, because we're all so used to the sort of formula that these superhero movies are, is I'd like to see maybe it features a particular hero like Superman as the main focus, and then they bring in another character. Maybe we'll see some other smaller characters that will then spawn into their own solo movies that'll have other characters still in it. That way it's not, just like the comic books are. There's a lot of times where they're helping each other out and they're all in there, and we're okay with that. Even though it's Wonder Woman in there, she still gets help from other people in the universe. And I think maybe they'll play it that way, and maybe it'll be okay. Instead of doing the Marvel thing where you have your Phase 1 and then team movie, Phase 2, another team movie, maybe they could just kind of mix it all up. And instead of maybe having only solo movies before the big team movies, they'll have small little sections where we're getting our fix. And then there's like the big epic.
I would settle for anything over there. I mean, I would even watch, if they did a Justice League movie where all the characters already know each other, they're all the Justice League from the beginning of the movie, there's no introduction, it's just a story where the Justice League goes out and kicks Darkseid's ass or something. I would be okay with that because I understand those characters and I know where they're coming from.
Right.
But I understand that doesn't apply to all audiences.
Not everybody.
But I think that Batman and Superman, I guess we'll just have to kind of wait and see, what happens, if it's good, if it's not good. And we'll just see from there, and it'll probably give us a pretty good indication of what the Justice League movie will be like. All I can say is, I don't care if there's a Flash solo movie, I don't care if there's a Wonder Woman solo movie, I'll see them, I'll probably enjoy them if they come out. The Green Lantern solo movie, not so good, so...
I think they should give him another shot on that one.
Really?
I like Ryan Reynolds as that, and I know they were talking about him doing a Deadpool movie or whatever, but I thought as Hal Jordan, he was awesome. But the story just fell flat. Like, there was so much visual effects, and they were just, I think, concerned about 3D. I don't know what it was, but it had so much potential, but it just fell flat for some reason. And I liked it, but then when I saw it again, I was like, I probably won't watch this again. Because there's a substance there that I missed completely. But I like his performance, and I think that they should maybe not reboot it, but just pretend it didn't happen and make another one. I hope that they do that.
The Green Lantern, again.
Yeah.
Well, that's all that we have time for today. Leave a comment below and let us know what your favorite movie is and why. The top 5 comments will be featured in next week's episode. Also, if you want one of these fly Richalvarez t-shirts, click the link in the description below to our District Lines page to get yours now. See you next time!